Am I the a-hole for considering kicking my daughter out to save my marriage? Major update. It's taken me days to gather my thoughts and the courage to write this update. I'm overwhelmed, heartbroken, and lost. My husband has asked for a divorce, and I don't know what to do anymore. I feel like I'm being forced to make an impossible choice between my daughter and the love of my life. Clarifications and context. First, I want to clarify some things that came up in the responses to my initial post. Yes, we have locks on every door in the house. I don't know why my daughter didn't use the lock that day. It's a question I've been grappling with myself. As for the cameras in the house, we have them for security purposes. They aren't positioned to invade anyone's privacy. One faces the front door, another covers the back door, and there's one at the end of the hallway. The hallway camera can see every door along the corridor, but it doesn't invade the privacy of any room. Additionally, my husband and I have an ensuite bathroom in our bedroom, but it's currently unusable because we're renovating it. This is why my husband had to use the main bathroom on the day everything unraveled. The devastating conversation. On Friday, my husband came home to talk. It was the first time I'd seen him in days, and I was desperate to reconcile. He sat me down and calmly explained his decision. He began by showing me his phone, where messages from my family members had flooded in. They called him horrendous names, labeling him a predator and asking him how many times he had secretly peeked at my daughter before this incident. The hatred in those messages was unbearable to read. He said, "I don't think I can come back from this. Even if I wanted to, your family will never trust me again. They'll always see me as some kind of monster. And the truth is, I don't feel safe anymore. Every day at work, I've been waiting for the police to show up. Your daughter's lies have shattered my life." He told me HR at his job had been contacted by some of my family members, accusing him of misconduct. Thankfully, his employers trust him and have refused to act without evidence. But the damage to his reputation and peace of mind has been done. My husband assured me he still loves me and appreciates that I've stood by him, but he said our relationship has been irreparably damaged. He refused my suggestion of counseling, saying, "It's too broken to fix." I begged him to reconsider. I told him I was willing to do anything to make things right, kick my daughter out, cut off my toxic family, even move away to start fresh. He listened but shook his head. He said, "I could never ask you to abandon your daughter. If you did, I wouldn't be able to look at you the same way. But I also can't be around her or live in constant fear that something like this could happen again. The only solution is for us to separate." Before I could respond, my daughter ran into the room, crying. I think she had been eavesdropping on our conversation. My husband immediately jumped up, held his hands out, and said, "Don't come near me." He pulled out his phone and announced he was going to record their interaction. I saw something break in my daughter's expression at that moment. My daughter's confession. Through tears, my daughter apologized profusely. She admitted she had been making up scenarios with her cousin for fun, and the cousin took the story and ran with it. She said she never meant for it to go this far and thought it would blow over. My husband asked, "If you knew it was a lie, why didn't you clear it up immediately?" She had no answer. He showed her the hateful messages he'd received, and she went completely silent. We talked for hours, but by the end of it, my husband remained firm in his decision. He said, "I'll give you 3 months to move out of the house since it's mine. Your daughter can keep the car I gave her as a gift, and I'll cover her tuition for the rest of the year. But I can't stay in this marriage." He told me he hadn't hired a lawyer yet and hoped we could settle things amicably. He promised to be fair in the divorce and harbors no ill will toward me. But his tone was heartbreakingly detached, like he was returning something to a store rather than ending a 5-year marriage. A broken family. After my husband left, I sat on the couch, numb. My daughter collapsed on the floor, sobbing and repeating, "I'm sorry," over and over again. When I finally got up to check on my husband, I saw him sitting in his car in the driveway, crying. That image will haunt me forever. Since then, my daughter and I haven't spoken a word to each other. My family members, now aware of the truth, have shown up at my house to apologize. My daughter shared the hallway camera footage with them, finally proving my husband's innocence. But their apologies feel hollow and too little, too late. Every time they knock on the door, I just close it in their faces. I've been inundated with calls, texts, and social media messages. Blocking one account only leads to another popping up. My desperate attempts to save my marriage. I've tried everything to convince my husband to give us another chance. I've sent him messages, called him, and even gone to his parents' house and workplace. He refuses to see me. His response is always the same, "I can't take the risk. I understand why he feels this way, but it's killing me. He's the kindest, most respectful man I've ever known, and now I'm losing him because of a mistake my daughter made. I've thought about moving out with my daughter, hoping the distance might help my husband reconsider. But his words keep echoing in my mind. If you abandon your daughter, I'll never look at you the same way. Where do I go from here? I'm at a loss. My daughter's actions have destroyed everything, and I don't know if my marriage can be saved. I haven't spoken to a lawyer yet, but I know I'll likely have to give up the house since it was my husband's before we married. The reality of the situation is sinking in, and I know I need to act, but I feel paralyzed. My husband has always been the steady, loving presence in my life, and now he's slipping through my fingers. Every time I think about contacting a lawyer, it feels like I'm finalizing the end of something that I desperately want to save. But I can't ignore reality anymore. My daughter's actions have caused irreparable damage, and while I want to hold her accountable, I also recognize that she's still my child. I've been trying to reconcile my feelings, the anger and betrayal from her lies, the guilt for wanting to choose my husband over her, and the overwhelming sadness of potentially losing both relationships. Since the day my husband came to talk, my daughter has barely spoken. She stays in her room, avoiding me, and I haven't pressed her for conversation. I think she's ashamed, and part of me hopes that means she's starting to grasp the gravity of what she's done. But another part of me worries that she's retreating into herself, which isn't healthy either. I want to talk to her, to ask why she let things escalate so far, but I don't know if I have the emotional strength for that conversation right now. Every time I look at her, I feel an overwhelming mix of emotions: love for my child, anger at her thoughtlessness, and sadness for what we've lost as a family. I've been sending my husband messages every day, apologizing, pleading, and trying to get him to reconsider. I've even written him letters, pouring out my heart and promising to do whatever it takes to rebuild our marriage. He reads my messages, but his responses are brief and distant. I'm sorry, but I can't. This isn't something I can come back from. I need to move on. It's like he's built a wall around himself, and no matter what I say or do, I can't get through. I've tried reaching out to his parents again, but they've made it clear they're standing by his decision. They're kind and sympathetic, but they believe he's doing what's best for his own well-being. And deep down, I can't blame them for that. I've started to come to terms with the fact that this divorce might be inevitable. If it happens, I know I'll lose not just my husband, but also the life we built together. The house, the shared memories, the future we planned, it's all slipping away. I don't know where my daughter and I will go. My parents have offered to let us stay with them temporarily, but their relationship with my husband is strained at best, and I don't know if being around them will help me heal. The thought of starting over at my age is terrifying. I've spent years building a life with my husband, and now I might have to rebuild everything from scratch. While I'm devastated by the loss of my marriage, I can't ignore the fact that my daughter's actions are what started all of this. I've been wrestling with whether or not to make her move out, as I told my husband I would. Part of me feels like it's the right thing to do, to show her that her choices have consequences. But another part of me worries that abandoning her during such a pivotal time in her life will only make things worse. She's 19, legally an adult, but still so immature in many ways. I've thought about having her move in with my parents for a while. Maybe some distance between us would give us both a chance to process everything and figure out how to move forward. But I'm also afraid that if I send her away, it'll confirm to my husband that I'm choosing her over him, even though he said he'd never ask me to abandon her. I keep replaying the last few weeks in my mind, wondering what I could have done differently. Should I have confronted my daughter more forcefully when this all started? Should I have reached out to my family sooner to set the record straight? Should I have fought harder for my husband when he first distanced himself? The guilt is eating me alive. I feel like I failed both my husband and my daughter in different ways. I wasn't strong enough to stop this spiral, and now it feels like I'm paying the price for my inaction. At this point, I'm not sure what the future holds. My husband has given me 3 months to move out, and I know I need to use that time wisely. I've started looking for apartments and exploring job opportunities in case I need to support myself and my daughter on my own. But part of me still clings to the hope that my husband might change his mind. Maybe if I can show him how committed I am to making things right, he'll reconsider. I've also thought about suggesting a trial separation instead of a full divorce. Maybe if we both had some time and space to process everything, we could find a way to rebuild our relationship. But I'm afraid to bring it up, worried he'll see it as me grasping at straws. I feel like I'm standing at a crossroads, and every path leads to heartbreak. If I prioritize my marriage, I risk alienating my daughter. If I focus on my daughter, I lose the man who's been my rock for the past 5 years. I don't know how to make this decision, and I'm terrified of making the wrong choice. All I know is that I love my husband, and I don't want to lose him. But I also can't ignore my responsibilities as a mother. If anyone has been through something similar, I'd appreciate any advice or perspective you can offer. Right now, I feel like I'm drowning, and I don't know how to find my way back to the surface. This situation is tearing me apart, and I'm running out of time to figure out what to do. Am I making the right choices? Is there even a right choice in this mess? I'm desperate for clarity, but all I feel is confusion and pain. After days of sleepless nights and agonizing over what to do, I finally contacted a lawyer. I didn't want to, but my husband had encouraged me to so we could handle the divorce amicably. Sitting across from a stranger and discussing the division of assets and next steps made everything feel painfully real. The lawyer was kind but firm, explaining the realities of my situation. Since my husband owned the house before we married, it would be difficult to make a claim to it. The car was a gift to my daughter, so that would remain hers. My lawyer asked if I wanted to push for spousal support, but I declined. I wasn't here to take from my husband, I just wanted him back. Even so, the conversation left me feeling hollow. I had to start thinking about life without him, a reality I was desperately trying to avoid. That night, my daughter finally came to me, her eyes red and swollen from crying. For the first time since the incident, she opened up about everything. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen, Mom," she said, her voice shaking. "I was stupid. I was messing around with my cousin and didn't think it would go this far. I thought everyone would just forget about it." Her words were filled with regret, but they didn't erase the damage she had caused. I asked her why she hadn't come clean earlier, why she let my husband endure weeks of torment and accusations. She looked at the floor and whispered, "I was scared. I didn't know how to fix it, and the more time passed, the worse it got." I could see she was genuinely remorseful, but it didn't change the reality of our situation. I told her, "Your actions have consequences. I don't know if we'll ever be able to fix this." She broke down again, crying about how she had ruined everything and didn't know how to make it right. For the first time, I saw how deeply this was affecting her, but I didn't have the emotional strength to comfort her. I reached out to my husband again after that conversation, hoping to share what my daughter had said. I thought maybe hearing her regret might soften his heart, but he refused to meet or even talk to me. His texts were brief: "I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore. Please stop trying to change my mind. This isn't about love, it's about safety and trust." Those messages were like knives to my heart. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to make him see that we could rebuild what had been broken. But how could I argue with him when I knew he was right? Trust had been shattered, and no amount of love could fix that overnight. My parents came over a few days later. They were hesitant, unsure if I would even let them in after everything that had happened. I debated closing the door in their faces but decided to hear them out. They apologized profusely, admitting that they had overreacted when they first heard the accusations. "We should have come to you directly," my dad said. "We should have trusted you to handle it." While I appreciated their apology, it felt hollow. The damage had already been done. Their accusations had fueled the fire and pushed my husband even further away. I told them as much, and they nodded, accepting responsibility for their part in the chaos. My mom asked, "What can we do to help?" But I didn't have an answer. What could they do? Nothing they said or did would bring my husband back or erase the pain he'd endured. I've started looking at apartments, even though the thought of leaving this house breaks my heart. Every corner of it holds memories of my husband, the way he laughed in the kitchen while cooking dinner, the nights we spent curled up on the couch watching movies, the garden he lovingly tended in the backyard. But I can't stay here. It's his house, and he's made it clear that he doesn't want us here anymore. I've also begun looking for a therapist, both for myself and my daughter. We're both carrying so much guilt and pain, and I know we can't heal on our own. A week later, I received an unexpected message from my husband. It wasn't what I'd hoped for, but it was something. He wrote, "I don't know if I'll ever be able to come back to this relationship, but I wanted to tell you that I don't blame you. I know you tried your best to support me, and I appreciate that more than you know. I need time to heal and figure out what's next for me. I hope you and daughter's name can do the same. I'm sorry for how things ended, but I can't see a way forward right now." Reading his words brought tears to my eyes. It wasn't the reconciliation I'd been praying for, but it was a sign that he didn't hate me. That small bit of kindness gave me the strength to keep going. As the 3-month deadline approaches, I'm trying to focus on what's next. I found a small apartment that will work for my daughter and me. It's nothing like the life we had before, but it's a start. I've also started setting boundaries with my family. Their involvement in this mess has caused so much harm, and while I can't cut them out completely, I've made it clear that I need space. As for my daughter, we're taking things one day at a time. I've made it clear that her actions have consequences, but I'm also trying to support her as she processes everything. She's young and made a terrible mistake, but she's also my child, and I can't turn my back on her completely. This experience has taught me so much about love, trust, and the fragility of relationships. I still love my husband deeply, and I don't know if I'll ever stop hoping for a miracle. But I also know that I can't force him to stay if he doesn't feel safe or supported. For now, I'm focusing on rebuilding my life and helping my daughter do the same. It's not the life I imagined, but it's the one I have, and I have to make the best of it. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest I've ever endured. Moving out of my husband's house felt like closing the door on a life I had cherished deeply. Each box I packed was a reminder of what I was losing, not just the physical space but the life, love, and security we had built together. My daughter helped me pack, though she seemed weighed down by guilt. She avoided eye contact most of the time, only speaking when absolutely necessary. I could tell she was trying to stay out of my way, but her silence was suffocating. On our last day in the house, I walked through each room one final time. The kitchen where we had shared countless meals. The living room where we decorated our first Christmas tree together. Our bedroom, now stripped of all personal touches. My husband wasn't there, he had stayed with his parents to give us space, but his absence was almost louder than his presence. As I locked the front door for the last time, I felt like I was leaving a part of myself behind. The apartment we moved into was small, but it was functional. It wasn't home, though, and it didn't feel like it ever could be. The walls were bare, the furniture sparse, and everything about it screamed temporary. My daughter and I had barely spoken since the move. She spent most of her time in her room, and I didn't have the energy to push her to talk. I was emotionally drained, trying to come to terms with everything that had happened while also figuring out how to move forward. One evening, I finally mustered the courage to sit down with her. "We need to talk," I said, my voice soft but firm. She looked at me with wide, teary eyes, like she'd been waiting for this moment but dreading it at the same time. "I know you're sorry," I began. "I can see it, and I believe you. But being sorry isn't enough. We have to figure out how to make sure this never happens again." She nodded silently, tears streaming down her face. For the first time, she opened up about her feelings. "I didn't mean to ruin everything," she whispered. "I just didn't think. I thought it was harmless at first, and then it snowballed, and I was too scared to say anything. I thought it would fix itself, but it didn't. I know I've ruined your life, Mom. I've ruined his life too." Hearing her take responsibility was a step forward, but it didn't erase the pain. I told her as much. "I love you," I said. "But love doesn't mean there aren't consequences. We're here, in this apartment, because of what happened. I hope you understand that." She nodded again, and we sat in silence for a long time. I started seeing a therapist shortly after the move. At first, it felt strange to open up to a stranger about something so deeply personal, but it quickly became a lifeline. My therapist helped me process my grief and guilt, and they gave me tools to start rebuilding my life. I also encouraged my daughter to see someone, though she was hesitant at first. Eventually, she agreed, and I could see small changes in her over time. She started to open up more, not just to me but to herself. One day, about 2 months after we moved out, I received an unexpected text from my husband. "How are you doing?" It was a simple question, but it felt monumental. I hadn't heard from him in weeks, and I had assumed he was done with me completely. I replied honestly, telling him I was doing my best but that it was hard. That opened the door to more communication. We started texting occasionally, nothing too deep, but it was a start. He asked about my daughter, and I told him she was working on herself. I didn't push him to meet or talk on the phone, afraid of scaring him off. One evening, he sent a message that made my heart ache. "I miss you, but I don't know if I can trust again. I hope you understand." I told him I did. I told him I missed him too and that I wasn't giving up on us, even if he needed more time. A few weeks later, he agreed to meet for coffee. It was the first time we had seen each other since the day he asked for a divorce. I was nervous, unsure of what to expect, but also hopeful. When he walked in, he looked tired but calm. We hugged briefly before sitting down, and for a moment, it felt like nothing had changed. We talked for hours. He told me about the therapy he had started, how he was working through his own feelings of betrayal and fear. I told him about the changes I was making, how I was trying to hold my daughter accountable while also supporting her growth. By the end of the conversation, he admitted he still loved me but wasn't sure if reconciliation was possible. "I don't know if I can ever get past this," he said. "But I'm willing to keep talking, to see where things go." It wasn't a promise, but it was something. Since that meeting, we've been in regular contact. We've had a few more coffee dates, and while things are still fragile, I feel like we're slowly rebuilding a foundation. My daughter has continued therapy and has even started volunteering at a local organization to make amends in some small way. She still has a long way to go, but I can see she's trying, and that means everything to me. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if my husband and I will ever fully reconcile or if we'll remain apart. But for the first time in months, I feel like there's a sliver of hope. Life doesn't look anything like I imagined, but I'm learning to accept that. All I can do now is take things one day at a time and keep working toward a better future, for myself, for my daughter, and maybe, just maybe, for us as a family.